This is Erik Danielsson of Cannibal Corpse. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast with Andrew McKay Smith.
Greetings all. Thanks so much for joining me for this very special installment of the show, featuring a conversation with Erik Danielsson from the Swedish black metal horde Watain. I'm so thrilled to be able to bring you this one here. I wasn't sure if a chat would eventuate on the promotional trail for the Agony and Ecstacy of Watain, the new album from the lads for 2022. But lo and behold, it happened. There was only a few slots allocated for Australia, and thank God I got one of them. Maybe thank God isn't the right way of describing it, but either way, I do feel rather thrilled to bring you this chat with the man himself. Now, a few points before we dive into the conversation. My internet connection was rather garbage, which cut off the conversation toward the end. So there's not too many issues in terms of cut off conversation throughout, you know, the static and all the rest of it, the broken line, so to speak. But it cut me off as we had one more question to go before the end. So not bad. We got about 90% of the way through the chat, but I was only allocated about 25 minutes to half an hour, which is never going to be enough time to cover all of the questions that I actually had planned. So I wrote out about 15 or so questions. I was only able to ask 4 or 5 or thereabouts. Maybe, just maybe, I'll have another opportunity to chat to Erik, and if I do, well, you'll know about it because I'll bloody well post it. Now, before we get to the chat, if you're listening via the podcast apps, the usual ones, Spotify, Apple, and God knows whatever else is out there, there's so many these days, you're going to listen to a tune to give you some context about how magnificently mighty this album is from Watain. Ceramosa is a song that I've picked, and you'll hear why throughout the chat. Unfortunately, if you're listening via YouTube, I can't play it. That's another thing. You won't be watching any video on YouTube. And the reason for that, Erik didn't have his video switched on. Look, my thoughts and opinions on the matter are that if Erik or anybody else calls through on Zoom or connects through on Zoom and they don't have their video switched on, they know it's video. They're going to switch it on if they want. He didn't. I didn't ask. Sometimes I think it's going to ruin the dynamic. More often than not, I don't really care, to be honest with you, because the chat, the conversation is the most important thing. You can imagine he's there because he certainly is. There you go. One final note before we kick into things. The KK I'm talking about in the introductory exchanges is KK Warslut from Destroyer 666.
Andrew.
G'day, Erik. How's things, mate?
Pretty good. I'm sorry I'm a bit late. Got held up here.
Oh, don't mention it, mate. I think you're at the end of about 5 or 6 of a block of 5 or 6, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, something like that. But then I got Europe after that. So.
Oh my God.
But it's cool. It's fine.
Sweet.
That's a cool shirt.
Yeah, you know the band, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course.
Yeah,
good friends.
I actually wore it in tribute of you both. I've got to be honest with you. Yeah, they only produced about 50 of them, I think, and I managed to snag one. So
exactly. It's fucking awesome.
Yeah. They're bastards though. They don't like to do interviews. I've asked to reach out to KK many times and just said, "Hey, I'm an Aussie and I'm a normal bloke. I'll actually give you production oversight in terms of I've done this a few times, right? You know, some of the ex-members of Cradle of Filth, and I'm sure you know, have an axe to grind, and they want production oversight, editorial oversight, I should say." And I've said,
shit! All right, that's advanced.
Mate, you know how it is. So we've had a few conversations before, and I would never expect you to remember them. But look, I'm a dad and householder, and I've got a mortgage and shit, and we love this. You do this, and I never want to detract and be a part of all of that fucking clickbaity bullshit, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, the way I know KK, he's just he walks his own path in life, and he's different from a lot of people that I know, and definitely very different from a lot of people that, you know, do interviews on regular intervals. So yeah, I'm not surprised, but it's a shame. It's a man who's got a lot of interesting things to say.
He
lot
does.
of bullshit too. But
I'll actually, if he'd ever be up to it, I'll write books, you see, and I'd love to write something that's semi-autobiographical for him, you know, ghostwrite it or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. That would have been something.
Yeah, he's just got to open that door. I don't think he ever will, to be honest with you. He loves the I don't think it's an act either. It's just he's got that. He's hidden from worldview. You know, he just appears on stage every once in a while. But you're one of the few people that is really good mates with him. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Indeed. How have the phone calls? They're not phone calls anymore, are they? They're all Zoomers and Skypes. But how have they been going? Have they been interesting, or have you had fairly decent conversations?
It's high and low. It's agony and ecstasy. but it's it's been mostly good. To be honest, it's a cool album to talk about, and Watain presents a pretty wide scope of subjects to talk about, even if it's like the most standard questions. When answering them from a Watain perspective, they still become pretty. I don't know. You can elaborate on them, So now it's been good. I enjoy it actually. It's I think that. I mean, I've done quite a bunch now, and in general, it's been like a pretty cool experience. I like talking about stuff that I like. So.
I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed your conversation with Rob Flynn, because I've got to be frank with you, I don't like the guy at all. But sorry, but he's a bit of a virtue signaler and a lefty and all the rest of it. But he you know what he did? He allowed you to speak. He allowed you to speak your mind on subjects without interrupting you, and that's a skill.
Yeah. No, but that was cool. I didn't really. I just I had a few interviews that day, and that was one of them, and I never realized how big a thing it would have become. But it was good. It was a good talk. I mean, I just knew that he was from the Bay Area. I never listened to his band or anything, but I knew that he was from the Bay Area, and that he knew a lot of good bands from there. I've always been pretty into that scene, not the thrash scene from there, but the like death metal scene from around there.
There's some killer bands from San Francisco outside of the Big Four, aren't there? There's some amazing bands.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but look, I've probably only got another 20 minutes or so to chat to you. And look, I am a long-time fan of the group, I must say. And yeah, been around for about, 15, 16 years, about as long as I think you can realistically be from Australia. I mean, it's hard. Back in the early 2000s, we sort of caught on to things 5 to 10 years after everybody else, just with the nature of the way the media was at the time. That's all gone now. It's all very flat, as you know, globally. But I've got to say, look, the agony and the ecstasy of Watain, I haven't lived with it long enough to make any genuinely bold or grand declarations, but I must say, on first impressions, I think you've knocked it out of the park here. It's an album that's different, and here's the key point. It sounds like it's the equal to the Fire and Majesty that you created on Trident Wolf Eclipse, which I feel is the strongest album by the group to date. So was there any... Yeah, I do, yeah. I love your later work. I like your earlier work, but I've got to say, I think you're just getting better.
Thank you.
The production's great. I think you've learned how to articulate the music. The lyrics are one thing, but getting the music to make the point. And when I talk about Fire and Majesty, they're the two words that come to mind when I think of Watain. Just magnificent hellfire and brimstone on stage. You've captured it. You're lightning in a jar that way. There's a few bands. There's Pantera. There's you guys. Jesus, outside of that, it's tough to sort of know where to go, to be frank. But with this album, mate, was there anything specifically that you were looking to achieve?
Well, first of all, thank you. It's great to hear that kind of analysis. And one of the things you said has a bit to do with my answer, and it's that I've always been a bit confused by how most bands, especially in death and black metal, all walk the same path from being like super wild, super good in the start, and then becoming like increasingly tired, increasingly like, I don't know, unmotivated, less radical, and so on, right? I've always been a bit like confused by this. I mean, the way I experience it is that the longer you do this, the more it fills you up. The more you become one with it, the more skill you acquire, of course, and so on. And then that's a very important point for me. And one of the things that I was inspired by when writing this album was the idea of being able to prove to people that, well, you can also do it this way. You can also have a band for 25 years and release your 7th album on Nuclear Blast and having it be, like a climax, like a kind of crescendo of like a culmination of what you have done in the past. I think that's the way you should always approach an album, but it's definitely how we approached this one, and I'm glad that it comes across. If I understood you right, I'm glad it comes across that way. I think it's a good point to be able to prove, and I am. To be honest, it wasn't even that hard, or it was like, I mean, yeah, okay, let's see where we're at. Let's see what we have. Let's see what we have acquired in terms of, self-awareness, in terms of wisdom, in terms of strength, in terms of technical skill, in terms of musicianship or like artistic skill in general, and take it from there.
Yeah, well, you've done it. You've done a magnificent job. Yeah. Now, what motivated the move from Nuclear Blast to Nuclear Blast from Century Media?
Well, basically because our story is one of escalation and one of constant increasing. And I don't mean that necessarily in terms of success or how wide you reach, but that's also a part of it, or it's a result of being on a path of constant escalation. And I see it as actually I think it's not that far-fetched for a band like Watain to be on the biggest metal label in the world. We have devoted our entire lives to what we're doing, and we want the best people to work with it. The ones that have the biggest muscle, the ones that has the greatest capacity. That's what we're gonna need to continue. So that's great. And there were some interesting initial meetings before we signed. When we were. I mean, we always do that when we are looking at a potential collaboration with anyone. We always make sure that we expand as much as we need to on the fact that Watain works a little bit differently than perhaps other bands that they are used to work with, and yep. I think it's especially important with a label that has such a commercial impact as Nuclear Blast has. I think it's super important for us to have them know that this is going to be a little bit of a different ride for them, and that there might be they might realize that we have a bit of a different focus, a bit of a different approach that maybe is more I don't know, less business strategy and more spirituality and more an artistic approach in general, I think. So that was, and that's always a little bit interesting because we also work with obviously quite radical ideas and then expressions, right? With Watain. Yeah. I mean, that's what we do, and so those meetings were. It would have probably been fun to be a fly on the wall on those meetings for a lot of people because they were a little bit tense sometimes, a little bit awkward. But I got to say that the Nuclear Blast team has been. I think they're motivated by working with something that is a little bit different from what they're used to. That's my impression, and they are doing a fantastic job. I mean, they're on top of their game.
Did Marcus reach out to you from Atomic Fire? Because I mean, you're one of the biggest metal bands in the world these days.
We had our mind set on Nuclear Blast. We weren't really interested in anything else, and we wanted to work with the people that we work with now. So nothing else was really interesting for us at that point. It was our decision. It was our move, not anyone else's. That made us sign to Nuclear Blast.
I get the impression someone would be hard pressed to force you guys to do anything.
Yeah, that's not really how we work. And I mean, I take a bit of pride, I suppose, in being able to look back on everything we have done with Watain, having come from the band and not from anywhere else. I mean, of course, we have had tremendous help from good collaborators and people that have been working for Watain and labels that have been working for Watain, but all the substantial decisions were made by the band, and all the crucial moves were made by the band, and they were all internal decisions. They never came from like external push or anything like that. And I mean that's something that I guess matters perhaps more to us personally than to anyone else, but it is a fact, and I think it's for me it makes sense also to underline it, because it ultimately it also corresponds with what we talk about in our work, that we talk about independence, and we talk about freedom and liberation, and we talk about a radical path forward that is not made up by anyone else than yourself.
Very independent, very spiritually and physically independent. I love that about you guys. And look, something about the new album as well. You've got a tune on there that I haven't heard, the style of which I haven't heard you write before, Ceramosa. Now, it's one of those tunes that it makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. There is something very, very special about that particular tune. Do you feel the same way?
Thank you, Andrew. Yes, I definitely do. And I think we look for those moments in general as musicians and as composers of music. Those are the crucial moments you look for, kind of when you write. Like, and you cannot keep them at a constant. You can't have them coming constantly. You can't, you cannot build your entire musical output on these kind of things, but they have to be there. I definitely agree that Ceramosa is a song that carries a lot of those moments in that sense. And to me, well, I mean, as a lyric writer, it's such a I don't know. It's a very nice and rewarding thing to be able to write words to that kind of music. It becomes like I don't know. It's like building a. No, I don't really know how to put it, but it's definitely those kind of songs that kind of make me go forward, and progress and just enjoy what I do still, after all this time.
Yeah. I mean, the other one that I'm really enjoying is Leper's Grace, because at the 2 minute 30 mark there, you have to kill a tune. And I suppose you'd call it around the middle 8 if it was rock music or whatever, but about the 2 minute 30 mark, there's this almighty thrash riff that kicks in that I'm sure KK might ask if you can borrow from you a bit later. But it lasts for about 1.5 measures. Do you know what I'm talking? The bit that I'm talking about? It's colossal. I mean,
Thank you.
look, I mean, most bands would be able would cut off the end of their pinky finger for just that measure, for those 1.5 measures. But you've just left it in there as this as just this sonic surprise, and it just jumps straight out and hits you. So when
Right.
you're crafting a song, quality control has never been an issue for you guys. So how do you decide what goes where when you're assembling a bunch of killer riffs like that one into a song?
Well, that particular song was the only one that we actually finished in the studio, and it's built around material that we played together in the rehearsal room, kind of as for warming up, because it kind of got our blood pumping, but we didn't really know how to use it, you know, but it was that kind of material to us, and when we had the rest of the material completed, complete demo versions with vocals and lyrics and everything, we took the decision to finalize what was to become Leprosy Grace, and it was a matter of you know, it's kind of like when you're laying a puzzle and you have a 1,000-piece puzzle and you end up only having, you know, 10 pieces left. It's not that hard. You just fucking do it, you know, and that's a very rewarding feeling to arrive at the end of a long and painstaking writing process, to just like, we got this material left, we really want to use it, let's just fucking put it together, and that's what it becomes. So that's great, and I'm glad you mentioned that track. To me, it's like, well, I'm sure you can see why it's special to me in that sense, you know, because it's the last one being completed and out of the material that we just felt really strongly for, but had kept until the last, you know.
Well, they're the two that jumped out. That's why I mentioned them. But the other one, I wouldn't call it a slow burner because you don't really have them. But look, We Remain with a female vocal. Who's the lady that sung on that tune?
So the singer that appears in the beginning is an old friend of the band. Her name is Farida Lemouchi, and she sang in a band called The Devil's Blood. Together with her brother Salim, and Salim in turn, he also played guitar for Watain for a while. They're from Holland, but Salim joined us on guitar for a couple of US tours. And The Devil's Blood were a fantastic band where Farida sang. They did more of like the Rocky Erickson kind of rock and roll, but with quite psychedelic, very satanic, and Salim passed away a few years ago, but we remain in close touch with Farida. We have been traveling together as friends and playing music together for many years, but we have never recorded anything together. So it was fantastic to finally be able to do that. We Remain also deals with, to a certain extent, it deals with the dark mother, the feminine divine, and
sure.
I wanted a voice that was able to live up to that. You know, you can't just have anyone. And to me, Farida is like fucking Nina Simone or Edith Piaf or something like that. You know, she's not really a rock singer. She's more like a classic singer. And I don't know, to stand in the studio and hear her just deliver her vocals on that song was just like that. That was a spine chiller.
Yeah. I'm so glad you went down that route too. And look, something else too. In terms of, I mean, your music can go in a lot of different directions, very intense. And I'm so glad that you picked somebody that comes from a different ballpark musically, but spiritually is aligned. I've heard a lot of bands have gone down this route. There's only one band, in my opinion, that has actually done it right, which is Blind Guardian, classical accompaniment. Okay. But you guys can do it. Yeah, Metallica are fucking awful doing it. I really can't stand those albums that they've done it with. And Rage did a pretty good job too, but you could do it. And I know you've got the the raw IQ to be able to figure that sort of thing out. So is that on the radar potentially somewhere down the line?
You mean like doing music together with like an orchestra?
Yeah, correct. But more like the way Celtic Frost did it with the Triptychon thing and Roadburn.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, I always dream about projects like that, and they are always kind of in the periphery all the time. To me, I have a bunch of similar ideas, but we do we do things pretty slow with this band. We are very meticulous in what we do, and everything has to be quite right, and which might seem a bit strange considering how also often like savage and full on and brute force we may be dealing with a lot of times, but we are very cautious in when it comes to like artistic work, and that's the kind of thing you can't fucking fail with, No. Like you really can't. It's like it can become like a fucking tumor on your work as a band.
I was nervous. I've got to say, I was nervous for Tom before the Triptychon thing. When they announced it, I was like, oh, if you fuck this up, it's going to affect your legacy. They didn't. They knocked it out of the park completely. But I hear you loud and clear. Yeah. So that's where we got up to. I asked about 30 seconds of my next question before I realised he couldn't hear me. So I just left in that last bit there because I could hear Erik acknowledging my statement there. So that's it. That's a conversation featuring Erik Danielsson from Watain, talking about, amongst many things, their killer album for 2022, the Agony and Ecstacy of Watain. Now, I'd appreciate it if you could stick around and listen to my thoughts and feelings about my new book, Scars and Guitars Volume 1. If you love listening to podcasts, well, you might love reading about them because I've written a book about so many of the people that I've interviewed for the Scars and Guitars podcast, including, funnily enough, as I mentioned throughout the chat, Erik Danielsson. So here's the promo. I'd appreciate it if you could show some support. If you want to hit me up and have a chat about the book because you've bought it, I'd really appreciate that, as a matter of fact. Via socials, via the website, I'm easily found, and I do communicate, as many of you know. If you reach out to me, we're all one big, happy musical community here. Anyway, here's the promo. Let's just call it a promo. And otherwise, until next time, it is a very goodbye for now. Cheers.
This is Erik Danielsson of Cannibal Corpse. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast with Andrew McKay Smith.
I've been the host of the Scars and Guitars podcast since 2017. The first musician I interviewed for the show was David Vincent from Morbid Angel, and things have just snowballed from there. In all, I've posted almost 650 podcast episodes featuring conversations with many of the leading lights of rock, heavy metal, and beyond. It just got to a point where I thought, I need to write a book about all this, so that's exactly what I did. In Scars and Guitars Volume 1, you'll read a heap of deep reveals and commentary, such as Des Fafara talking about Coal Chamber and why the band will never return.
If you're a band just starting out, you need to hear me. Do not start a band with partners. Ever.
Yeah, wise words there. Sage advice, mate, for anybody.
Don't ever, because I can't go do Coal Chamber right now unless I get others involved.
Phil Anselmo talks about the episode in his career which gives him the greatest sense of accomplishment.
I think the staying power of the fans and the staying power of the songs, whether it's Pantera, Down, or Superjoint, the fans remember the songs.
Alex Skolnick from Testament confirms that, yes, playing the guitar in Ozzy's band is anything but an ordinary gig. Will Silent Oz from Dimmu Borgir write a book? Pa from Sabaton gives advice to people who want to start a band.
Look at the team around you, look at the bandmates. If the guys want to be on the stage, then it's all cool. If the guys want to be backstage, then it's not going to be cool.
Current and former members of Cradle of Filth discuss the band's seminal 90s material. Read about the reaction to George Lynch and Mark from Suicide Silence's comments when they throw shade at then President Donald Trump.
We have this idiotic monster, this egotistical, self-aggrandizing, complete piece of shit in there. I just can't understand how we've gotten to this place.
And yeah, we kicked a hornet's nest with Sepultura. Percussive overlord Gene Hoglan talks about recording with Chuck Schuldiner.
Chuck was always, he was very open-minded, and he was into having his musicians that were playing with him just reach out for the best stuff that they had.
Phil Campbell from Motorhead discusses what it takes to get sober. John Five answers his critics who dismiss his tenure with Marilyn Manson.
My name is John Five, and Manson gave me that name, and I had some of the best years of my life in that band and learned a lot.
And we get the lowdown on Treyarch Zagtoth from those who would know, including his mother. All across Scars and Guitars Volume 1, there are moments of tension, relief, tragedy, exhilaration, and throughout it all, you'll obtain insight that I believe no one else has managed to obtain from many of your favourite artists. So treat yourself. Scars and Guitars Volume 1 is currently available as an ebook with a print edition on the horizon. Follow the links attached and download a sample. I'm sure you'll be compelled to read the whole book.